All right, very good. Thanks, everyone. For the recording, this is Agile Groupies, and we are hearing about SAFE, the good, the bad, and the ugly from Matt Lassater of Engaged Agility. All right, take it away, Matt.
Colleen. Like Colleen said, my name is Matt Lassater, and I run a company called Engaged Agility. I started Engaged Agility in 2020. My last day in the corporate world was Valentine's Day of 2020. The first 3 weeks of running my own company was great. The rest of it got a little bit scary there for about a year. It's all been great, but it sure was scary for just a little while we went through the whole COVID thing. Um, when I started my company, the idea was I would do some safe training stuff and then I would do some consulting. I'm by no means like, you know, a safe person that only does safe. I like to do whatever it is that the clients need. It just so happens that safe sells really well from a public training perspective, and it opens up a lot of opportunities and discussions on what does agility really mean and what are our real goals with agility. I've had clients call me and say, "Hey, can you come help us do safe?" And I say, "Absolutely." And then when I get there, I go, "Safe isn't what you need." I look at safe like any tool in my tool belt. There are times that I need a sledgehammer, and there's times that I need a fly swatter. Both of them have the ability to kill a fly. It's just one of them has some negative properties that might come along with trying to kill a fly. And I look at safe the exact same way. When you need a sledgehammer, use it. When you don't need a sledgehammer, find the other thing that works well. So as we go through tonight, nobody's going to say anything here that offends me or makes me rethink my decision around safe. You're not going to, you can call that baby ugly. That's totally fine with me. There are things within safe that I like, and there's things I don't like. And I think that's fair. I could probably say the same thing about any agile methodology. There's things within Scrum that I like and things that I don't like in Scrum, but that doesn't mean that they aren't useful for someone. So feel free to be open and honest and say whatever you want to say about safe. I certainly didn't create it, so there's not going to be any bad feelings here. But hopefully I can tell you why something is the way that it is or how it might be useful to someone. Are there alternatives? Maybe, and we can discuss those. So with that, let me go ahead and share my screen. All right, hopefully you see a great big intro slide there. Is that what
Yep.
we're looking at? Good deal. All right, so the good, the bad, and the ugly. To be fair, I this is a presentation that has rolled around in my head for a while, but didn't get made until it was time for this webinar. So I've talked the stuff, but never put it into one full specific presentation. It's not a terribly long presentation. It's only 9 slides, so don't think that I'm going to bore you with slides as we go through all of this. As we go through, what we'll talk about is just a safe overview. I want everybody to kind of have the same foundational understanding of safe, how the different parts interconnect. I always talk about how really any framework has roles, artifacts, and events that make it happen. So we'll go through those and just to kind of level set so we understand why the different parts of safe are there. And then we'll do a little game where we look at what have you heard? We've all heard things about safe. Hey, it's this, it's that. I really like this part about it, and I heard this part is dumb. We'll collect all that stuff on a little concept board, and then we'll go into kind of what does safe say. Like there's some things that safe says. Hey, people say this about us, and this is kind of our response to it. So we'll look at those, and then we'll just have an open discussion about whatever we want. Um, I know, let's see, the chat is going on. I'm going to pull it up over here on this other screen. And in chat, because we're going to need this here soon, I'm going to see, safe, good, bad, ugly. I created us a little concept board. If anybody has not used a concept board in the past, um, it's just like Miro or Mural or any of those. Um, Whenever you log into this link, it's going to want to know your name. Just say you want to log in as a guest. You'll still have to put your name in. That will name your cursor. Be as creative as you want with your cursor. You can give it your name, or you can give it a name like Spider Monkey or whatever you want. When you get into concept board, the basics of it, the hand will drag the screen around. The arrow will manipulate the object. So you can grab a sticky note if you want. If you need a new sticky note, you can come right up here to the sticky note to do it. If you kind of zoom in, you can wheel in on your mouse and zoom in. You can double click and you can actually type, this is my sticky note. And then if you've got something you want to talk about later, you can put it in the parking lot. And then when we get to the part about what have you heard, you can drag stuff and put it in the what you've heard. Okay. And just because I need to, I'll pin that down so nobody moves around the parking lot and the what you've heard box. So we'll use that for taking parking lot items and making notes as we go. And now back to the much anticipated presentation. So I want to start here with a safe overview. You guys can all have a copy of these slides when we're done. There's certainly nothing private or under NDA or anything like that that you wouldn't be able to see. But I wanted to go over the framework first and just start with getting an understanding of it. So I'm going to open up in my browser, scaledagileFramework.com. If there's one thing that I really think SAFe has done well, outside of the framework or any of that, the way they designed their page, where there's so much information on here. Yes, it's busy. It's it's hard to follow at times, but once you've seen it and you know that you can walk around here and you can click on it and you go, I really want to understand PI planning. Well, you can click here on PI planning. It opens up an article about it, and you can kind of read the overview of what PI planning looks like, why it's all there, and what the intent of it is. And you can do that for any of it. Um, there's a method to the madness that it laid out on here. Like after you understand it a little bit more, it'll kind of make more sense. We'll talk about at least some of that right now. So I'm going to get my markers out so that I can draw on here. I'm going to start with kind of a story. Let's pretend you and your best friend, y'all want to start a company. Y'all have been talking about this for years because that's what best friends do. And when you're thinking about this company, you're looking at a customer and you've got this customer who has some desire. They've got some problem that they need help solving, and you think you have a way to solve it. And the way that you're going to help solve it is with a solution. So, whatever this solution is, you and your best friend, you'll have it figured out and you decide it's time. And like all good startups, you start either in your garage or in your basement. And as you start, you and your best friend start to build this solution. And as you're building the solution, you're talking to the customer. And over time, there's times that y'all don't quite agree on what needs to happen next. Should we paint it red? Should we paint it blue? Should we, make the widget do this or make it do that? And whenever those kind of disagreements come up, you and your best friend do the best friend chatter thing where you kind of go back and forth and like you talk over each other, but at the same time, you know what each other is saying. And then boom, you get to it and you understand what needs to happen next. So y'all are aligned again and you start working on the solution a little bit more and you start pushing it further and further along to the vision that's going to solve all the problems of the customer. Over time, your business gets to be more popular. The solution that you're building is helping more people. They have more things that they'd like it to do, more integrations they want on it, whatever it is. And you can't do it yourself. It's too big for you and your best friend to do anymore. And so you hire some people and your garage gets a little bit full. There's like 4, 5, 6 people in there. And these 4, 5, or 6 people, they're working and doing the thing to help your solution grow. But after a while, you start to notice something. And these are my words, but they make sense. You notice this fracturing that happens. You've got Bill sitting in one corner of the garage, and you've got Mary sitting in another corner of the garage. And Bill says, finally, I got the database refactored. And Mary looks over and she goes, what do you mean you got the database refactored? I've been trying to write a database script all day long to get something to happen, and it keeps failing. And I assume it's because you were refactoring the database. And Bill's like, oh, sorry. After seeing this similar pattern over and over again, you decide, I need a way. I need a way for people to align and know where they are on any given day. They need a better way to communicate and collaborate. What can I do? And because you read a lot and you've heard a lot of things, you go, you know what? There's this thing out there called Scrum. Let's look into that. Now we all know Scrum is a framework. It's a framework to get a group of people, and these are my words, and I use them carefully. We take a group of people and we try to turn them into a high performing team. So we do that by giving them some roles, some artifacts, and events that help them track their work, that help them communicate, collaborate, and make sure that they're all moving in the same direction towards the same goals. Now, we're all familiar with Scrum, but I'm going to give just the brief overview. In Scrum, we get three roles. We get a Scrum Master. Now, because we're looking at the safe big picture here, it says, hey, we can have a Scrum Master, also called a team coach. We can talk about why that is later. But we have a Scrum Master, and the Scrum Master is there to coach, facilitate, remove impediments, focus on continuous improvement, and build a high performing team. You also have a product owner. The product owner is there to understand the wants, needs, and desires of the customer. We've already talked about our customer up here. And as they understand those wants, needs, and desires of the customer, they translate those wants, needs, and desires into work. And they prioritize that work on a backlog. Now, we're going to call it the team backlog here because that's what SAFe calls it. If you're focused on Scrum, it's called the product backlog. They're intended to be one and the same at this point. Now, the thing that is on that backlog, on that team backlog, if you're in Scrum, you call them product backlog items. SAFe uses stories, but you have these stories that are prioritized by the product owner that's intended to deliver the most value to the customer first and delay the lesser value. Those stories all fit within an iteration. Typically, the iterations are 2 weeks. And within the iteration, we have 5 different events that we talk about, 4 that are listed in the Scrum Guide, and 1 that I wish they would list in there. We'll go over them. The first one is iteration planning or sprint planning. In sprint planning, we take some subset of the team backlog and we decide, hey, we can fit 3 of these stories, 5 of these stories, whatever it is, into this 2-week time box that we've got. The 2-week time box is optional. It might be a 1-week time box, but it's always the same time box. 1 week, 1 week, 1 week, or 2 week, whatever it is, it's always the same. So in iteration planning, we plan what we're going to do in the next, we'll call it 2-week time box. And then every day we do a daily stand up, also called the huddle, the daily scrum, the team sync. I've heard it by a bunch of different names, but we get together and we roughly say, hey, what did we do yesterday? What are we going to do today? Do we have any impediments? Have we made a plan when we did our sprint planning? How are we progressing on that plan? And do we need to make changes based on the reality of where we are today? Is a lot of the questions that we're trying to get answered. Then the one that isn't listed in the Scrum Guide, but I wish it was, is refinement. We have to take a look into the future. We have to look at what's coming up in the next sprint. Do we understand it enough to where we can do sprint planning in the next week, week and a half? Is our backlog ready enough for us to do work in the future? And then we also have the demo or the sprint review, where we're reviewing the work that we did. We planned some stories back at the beginning of the sprint. We've completed some stuff and we need to go back and close that feedback loop. And we say, hey, we completed these things. Did it get us closer to where we want to go? And then we stop talking about the work for a little bit and we talk about the team and how do we improve the team. And when we do that, we use the retrospective. And in the retrospective, we kind of talk about what went really well in our iteration, what might have improved. And we take some very specific action items that we're actually going to do in a future sprint. It's not just a complaint session, it's a time for us to improve. So, you and your best friend, yes, we need to use Scrum. And all of a sudden, these people that were just a group of people in your garage helping work on the solution that you're building are now a team. They communicate, they collaborate, and they align using the elements of Scrum, using the roles, the artifacts, and the events to help them get there. All right. So life continues to be good. Scrum is helping our team be a high performing team. It's helping us align. It's helping us meet the demands of the customer in a much better way. And over time, our business continues to grow. And rather than just having one Scrum team or one Agile team, as SAFe would call it, sitting in our garage, we're too big for that now. We've now got like 5 Agile teams that are working together. And so now I use the ubiquitous drawing of we have multiple of these things here. So now I have multiple teams that are together in this office building that we're now renting down the street. And we're sitting back kind of watching these teams do their stuff, and we start to see a similar pattern to what we saw before. We see this fracturing, but it's not a fracturing between individuals where, Bill's sitting in one corner and Mary's in another, but it's team A is sitting, off on the west wing of the building and team B is on the west wing of the building. And there's that same fracturing going on. Team A is making changes to the database and team B is trying to write a script and things aren't quite working. You're all in there working on that same solution, but you're stepping on each other's toes. And so you go, what could maybe help this? How can I make this not happen? How can I prevent the fracturing? So you decide that maybe there's another framework that you can employ, something that can help multiple teams align, communicate, and collaborate to better serve the needs of the customer. In step safe. So we take the teams, and just like we put a group of individuals on a Scrum team, we're going to take a group of Scrum teams and we're going to put them on this thing called the Agile Release Train. Now, an Agile Release Train is typically somewhere between 50 and 125 individuals. If anybody really wants to dive deep into it, go look up Dunbar's numbers. Um, he talks about there being different numbers or sizes of groups where we can carry on different levels of relationships. And he says that anytime we get above about 100 to 125, we can't handle that many relationships in that manner. And it's just too much for our brains to handle. He's got other numbers that are in there as well. There's smaller numbers like 4 to 6 and like 15 to 20 groups of 15 to 20 in a group of people. But this upper limit of 100-ish to 125 people is about the biggest group that we can collaborate and communicate with over time. So we've got this group of Agile teams that we put on an Agile release train, and we give them some roles, some artifacts, and some events to help them communicate, collaborate, and align. One of the roles that we give them is called the RTE, the Release Train Engineer. Now, the Release Train Engineer is there to coach, facilitate, remove impediments, focus on continuous improvement, and build high-performing teams. Just like the Scrum Master was down here. Product management, and they use the word product management rather than product manager because oftentimes it takes a group of people to handle the product management activities rather than just one sole person. It kind of depends on the organization and the size of the train and the product that they're working on and things like that. But it might be multiple people that are on this product management team. But product management is there to understand the wants, needs, and desires of the customer. And after they understand those wants, needs, and desires of the customer, they translate those wants, needs, and desires into work that is prioritized on the ART backlog. The items that they put on that ART backlog are the features. Now, just like a story needs to fit within one iteration or one sprint of Scrum, a feature needs to fit into a time box that we call the PI. Now, a PI, where a sprint is made up of 2 weeks, a PI is also a time box, cadence-based time box. And it's made up of, at least in this picture, it's made up of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 iterations. The little dotted lines denote iteration boundaries. So you can see that a story here has to fit within the bounds of an iteration, but a feature fits within the bounds of a PI. Typically, a PI is about a quarter of a calendar year. Most organizations that I see, they use either 5, 6, or 7 sprints within a PI. I've got one company that I work with that uses 6 sprints plus a week. And it's a little bit weird, but what it does is it makes it fall exactly within the calendar year that was important to them. So we made it happen and they seem happy with it. So a PI is nothing more than a time box, just like a sprint is. It just happens to be that the time box is made up of multiple sprints. The third role that we talk about is the system architect. The system architect is there to create an intentional architecture for the Agile release train so that the teams can do emergent design within them. An example would be I could have 2 teams, and one team is sitting over there and goes, we really need to use some cloud services, and we're going to use AWS to make that happen. And they go off and they build something on AWS. And another team sitting there solving a different problem goes, we really need some cloud solutions. And they go off and they use Google Cloud. Now, that may or may not be a good answer, but the architect is the one that should go, hey, wait a second. We really need an intentional architecture when it comes to cloud infrastructure. We're going to use AWS, we're going to use Google Cloud, or we need to use both because they each have different capabilities or whatever it may be. But the architect is the one that gets to make those types of decisions. All right. The last role that I kind of want to talk about here is the business owner. Within large organizations, there's typically an executive. There's a business owner that is the one that's kind of at the top and really responsible for a lot of the outcomes that need to happen at the business level. A lot of times it's not just the product development stuff. It's the finance, the HR, the sales, the marketing, the all the stuff. They kind of sit above all of it. And we want the business owners to be engaged because they are probably one of the more important stakeholders, with the customer being the most important. So the business owner needs to be there. They can't just go, you guys go execute on that stuff. No, no, no. They have to get in and they have to be there with the Agile release train, helping them, at least from their station. They have to help them as much as they can and help keep them on the track. All right. Now we talked about some of the roles. We talked about a couple of the artifacts like the PI, like the art backlog, things like that. I'm going to clear the drawing and I'm going to grab my mouse here and I'm going to click right here on the PI. Now, I mentioned earlier that I really like the picture because you can click on stuff. You want to learn about a PI, you click here, and then you've got all the stuff that you want to learn about a PI. Now, the thing I like in this article is this right here. This is probably one of my most favorite pictures within SAFe. I call it the circle of life. There's several other people that call it the circle of life. I bet somebody else has a more creative idea for it, but we're going to call it the circle of life. And what the circle of life does is it helps us relate the events within SAFe to kind of how the events within Scrum happen. So this inner circle is supposed to be your team level events. They're supposed to map to pretty much what Scrum says. We've got iteration planning, sprint planning, for those of you who really like the Scrum terms. We've got the team sync, also called the demo, the huddle, the daily Scrum. We have refinement. We have the iteration or the sprint review, better known as the demo, and we have the iteration retrospective. So we do those iteration by iteration. Every team will do those alone as a team. In SAFe, we have this thing called PI planning, where in iteration planning, we plan the work that we're going to do for the next 2 weeks. In PI planning, all of the teams get together, the Agile release train gets together, and we plan the work that we're going to do for the next PI. We're going to plan the work that we do for roughly the next quarter of a calendar year. It's not as granular of planning as we do in iteration planning. It's not intended to replace iteration planning. It's intended to give us a guide to let us know where do we think we can go in the next quarter of a calendar year, and to help make sure that those steps that we're planning on taking are the ones that are the most important ones to take. Just like the team has to sync up and do their daily huddle and say, hey, we planned some stuff in iteration planning. How are we progressing on that plan? We have 3 different sync meetings in SAFe. We have the coaches sync, where the Scrum Masters and the RTE get together and they talk about how are we progressing and do we have any impediments? Are there any huge risks that we've stumbled across? We also have the product owner sync. The product owner sync also talks about how are we progressing towards the goals of the PI, but it also takes a little bit of a look forward. A lot of times they will talk about, okay, the next PI starts in 4 sprints. Are we ready for that? Are our features in place? Have we started breaking those features down into stories? Is everything looking good from a next PI perspective? And sometimes these 2 groups of people get together and they have an art sync. Again, the same goal, it's just a bigger group of people that are talking about it. Now, in the same way that we do backlog refinement, we have to prepare for PI planning. In backlog refinement, we're looking at our team backlogs and making sure that they're in good working order for the future. And as we prepare for PI planning, we're looking at the art backlog and making sure that it's in good working order for the upcoming PI planning. The other thing I'll say about PI planning, this is one of Matt's complaints about SAFe, there's a ton that's built into this little bitty dot, because to set up a PI, you have like technology that has to be set up. There's a lot of tooling. Maybe you have to reserve a room if you're lucky enough to get to meet in person. There's a lot of organization of, hey, business owners, our PI is coming up. You guys are responsible for presenting the vision that we're all supposed to align to. You have that set up. You'd be amazed at how hard it is to get the vice president of product to pull up a presentation that they've given 100 times and talk about the vision for the product of the future. But it's hard to do. There's a lot of coordination that goes on with it. But this idea of preparing for PI planning, it looks this big. It's actually quite a bit of work. And it's something that RTE, product management, they all work to push it forward. Now, as a team, we do an iteration review. The team is working on the thing that they're working on, and at the end of that, they do the iteration review and they say, "Hey, product owner, does this look like what we wanted? We need feedback on the thing that we've built." In SAFE, we also have a system demo. And in the system demo, remember, we've got teams that are building a much bigger system. So I've got a team that built this little piece of the puzzle, and I've got another team that built this little piece of the puzzle. They need to put that puzzle together. And that's what we're going to demonstrate in the system demo. And then just like the teams do a retrospective, where we stop talking about the work and we start talking about how are we doing as a team. In the inspect and adapt event, we talk about how are we doing as an agile release train? What can we do to improve? Do we have everybody here that is needed so that we can play all the games that we need to? Or are we left needing more help at the end of the day? Are we going outside the train for too much stuff? None of that's what you want to do. So the inspect and adapt event is intended to help the train improve and focus on continuous improvement. All right, I'm going to stop right there for just a second. Any questions so far about the roles, the artifacts, and the events of SAFE?
Yeah, Matt, I have one question. As we look at this cycle, the outer cycle that are the art events, how often does that run? And so how often do you see system demos? Does that happen just once a quarter, or do you see this on a more frequent cycle?
Perfect. I tell you what, I'm gonna click back over here to show where some of this stuff comes up on the big picture, and it'll help answer some of that stuff. So PI planning happens once per PI.
Right.
Okay, so about once a quarter, a calendar year. The system demos are these little dots at the top, and those happen once per iteration, just like the iteration review. They're not intended to be replacements for each other. Both are necessary in a scaled environment. The inspect and adapt happens at the end of every PI, so it also happens once a quarter. That little dot that said preparing for PI planning, it's not necessarily one event, it's something that happens throughout. And then while it's not shown on the big picture here, the sync meetings, they vary from time to time. For a brand new Agile release train, I tell them that they should have their team, their coaches sync. I like them to do them twice a week, so maybe on Mondays and Wednesdays. I like the product owner sync to be twice a week on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and then I like the art sync to happen once a week on Fridays. That's for a new Agile release train. For a relatively mature Agile release train, I'll do maybe a coach's sync and a product owner sync maybe once a week, maybe once per iteration, and I'll do an art sync once per iteration.
Okay.
I hit them all. I think I got
Yeah,
them.
yeah, that helps. And we do have a question in the chat. Are there any difference between Scrum and Scrum in Safe, or was it the same? So,
I think the biggest difference between if you went and read the Scrum guide and you look at how SAFe talks about it, I think the biggest difference is in some of the terminology. You know, SAFe is going to talk about possibly calling them a team coach rather than a Scrum master. They call them stories rather than product backlog items. They call them iterations rather than sprints. Other than the connective tissue intended to make it where it scales. In other words, when SAFe talks about a Scrum Master, they talk about a Scrum Master having responsibilities not only for the team but for the Agile release train. Like they have to go to the coaches sync and things like that. They have to facilitate things at the PI planning event. Those are the things that are they're going to make it a little bit different, but it's not anything that's that there's no deep changes. They literally took from and said, what kind of things do I need to add to make it make sense when we're talking in scale? All right. I'm going to click on something next only to show you that this exists. And I will tell you why it exists, and then we'll forget about it. Did somebody have a question? There we go. Thank you. All right. So I'm going to click up here where it says large solution. Actually, I'm going to click here where it says full, but it brings up the large solution, which is this box right here. Now, remember, SAFe is for a scaled environment, and some scales are much, much bigger than others. When we talked about our group of people and we put them on an Agile team, and we made an Agile team out of them, and then we had multiple Agile teams and we put them on an Agile release train. When the thing that we're building is so large and so complex that we need multiple Agile release trains to build it, we put them on a thing called the solution train. Solution train is optional. Not every organization needs a solution train. I've seen it implemented a couple of times, and at least once it was not needed. And it was back to that whole we picked up a sledgehammer to try to kill a fly idea. The time that you would need a solution train, this is me totally making it up. NASA building satellites seems like something I might need a solution train on. Boeing building airplanes seems like something I might need a solution train on. When I'm building an airplane, there might be an entire Agile release train that's dedicated to the control system in an airplane. So I push the stick and the nose goes down on the plane. I pull the stick and it comes up. There might be another Agile release train that's dedicated to the navigation system so that I know where I am flying in space and altitude and all this stuff. And then there might be another Agile release train that's dedicated to the infotainment system so that we can watch movies while we fly through the air. They're all working on the same solution, the plane itself. And it all has to integrate and work together. I mean, imagine if the people building the infotainment systems said, well, we're going to put on, 65-inch flat screen TVs. There's probably another group in there that'd be like, that's not going to fit. Like, we're building a fuselage that's only this big, so we got to talk, right? So the solution train is there for when you need it, but usually it's not. But the pattern that they built the solution train on is exactly the same. You get some new roles like the solution train engineer who's there to coach, facilitate, remove impediment, focus on continuous improvement, and build high performing teams. Who, like solution management, who's there to understand the wants, needs, and desires of the customer and translate it into this work that we put on the solution train backlog. The work items are called capabilities. And then you get the solution architect who is there to understand the entire architecture of the solution and help each individual Agile release train build within that architecture. You get a couple of new events like a pre-planning event. The bounds stay the same. The solution train executes on a PI boundary, just like Agile release trains do. You pick up an inspect and adapt event at the solution train level. You pick up a solution demo at the solution train level. The patterns are all the same, but you're just using it in a larger scale environment. All right, as promised, I would show you what that was, and then we would quickly forget about it because it's just not relevant for all companies in the world. All right, so now I want to tie something together. We talked a lot about execution. How the heck does work get to an Agile release train? Once it's on the Agile release train, the teams build the functional items that we're working on. They do the demos to show it, and they ship it out to the customer in the ways that they ship things out. But there's something bigger that happens at a large organization. There's this strategy and there's these goals that the organization has. That's where you can use the lean portfolio management function. So I'm just going to start here with the enterprise. It works for governments too, but an enterprise has goals. Typically, enterprise goals are things like, hey, we want to, expand in some of these markets, or we want to build some new products to help, help this new group of customers that we've got, or we need to do some compliance work so that we are a more sound company when it comes to audit and compliance type things. Whatever their goals are overall, they've got some. Now, these goals are, mm, I don't want to say negotiated, but there's a discussion about these goals with the portfolios. Now, an organization might have one to many portfolios. I worked for USAA for a long time. They are a financial services institution, and it seems pretty easy to understand what their portfolios might be. They had an insurance portfolio, so they sold homeowners insurance, car insurance, life insurance, all the insurances. They also had a bank, and they had checking accounts, savings accounts, and CDs and all that kind of stuff. And then they had an investment company where you could have a brokerage account to buy and sell mutual funds and stocks and all that stuff. You could do financial planning, all that kind of stuff. So those are three distinct portfolios that made up the enterprise of USAA. And each portfolio would, because they were a part of this enterprise, but they would sit there and they go, hey, we're really trying to grow our customer base. We called it the membership, but we're trying to grow our membership. Well, the way the bank grows membership and the way that the insurance company grows membership were two different ways. The negotiation between the enterprise and the portfolio would bring about these strategic themes. And the strategic themes were specific to each portfolio. The bank had their strategic themes that said, hey, we know that we want to grow our membership. The way we're going to do that is change our checking accounts, change our savings accounts, give different credit cards, whatever that is that made it such that the bank was helping to grow membership. And insurance would go, well, we've never given motorcycle insurance before, so we're going to do motorcycle insurance, we're going to do boat insurance, we're going to whatever. Two different ideas on how to grow membership. So the goals of the enterprise inform the strategic themes of a portfolio. A portfolio has a vision. And in fact, we have a current state of the portfolio and we have a future state of the portfolio. And oftentimes the things that go into this are, products are we providing today? Who are our key partners? Who are our key vendors? How do we make money? Where's our biggest expenses? We put that together. The picture that they've got here is called the portfolio canvas. It's a great way to just look at the different components that happen, that make up a portfolio. But we document what our current state looks like on a portfolio canvas. And then we go, you know what? If we were to offer this new type of credit card, what would that look like? And we build a future state portfolio canvas. And then there are steps that are needed to get from the current state to the future state. Those steps are articulated in epics. The epics are prioritized on the portfolio backlog. The epic gets split into multiple features. The features get split into stories, and the stories are worked on by the Agile team. And what we just did is created this thread throughout the entire system, from the goals of the enterprise to the thing that the Agile teams are working on, such that at any given time, I should be working, somebody down here on the team or on the Agile release train should be working to push the goals of the enterprise forward. That's there to create alignment. People are human. Alignment doesn't always happen. This is the intended way for it to happen, but that's the goal, is to create alignment from the things these guys are working on to the things that make the enterprise goals and help the enterprise move forward and provide the value to that customer. All right, I'm going to pause again because this concludes Matt's overview of SAFE. What kind of questions do y'all have about it?
I do have a question. So, how do you know your organization is agile, mature enough to move to scale agile? How do you know how do you measure that?
I don't know that it's as much of a measurement as it is a desire to work in a more agile way. So if you're using some type of ad hoc methodology, or if you're using a waterfall methodology and things are in fact, here, let me click right here because they give us some pretty cool. SAFE's overall goal is to create business agility, and they give us this business agility value stream right here. And the goal here is from the time some type of business opportunity emerges till the time that business opportunity is leveraged, we want to shrink that as much as possible. And if 2 to 6 months to a minimum viable product is what you're after, safe is like that. That's a good goal. We need to be doing that. If your organization is like, wow, whenever we see a business opportunity emerge, it's 4 years before we leverage it. Safe may have some answers for you. How can we do that? And Safe's answer comes down to, let's figure out what those big rocks are that we need to do. Let's break them down into MVP that we can deliver and get value and get feedback on it. And let's get the agile release train moving on it. But you have to have that thread that goes through it, because at this level, this is a very high level within an organization. But it takes the communication, collaboration, and alignment of something that's safe. Again, there are other things that can make it happen, but it takes that communication, collaboration, and alignment to make it happen. And that's when you go, yeah, that does take a long time for me. Like, from the time a business opportunity emerges till the time it's leveraged, we're on a 2-year cycle at best. If Safe can shorten that, that's where the value would come in.
Hey, Matt, the document you're looking at, and could you put the link to the scaledagileFramework.com in the chat window so people could jump and look at the same?
I can.
Thank you.
And it is also in, it's in the presentation that I have as well. So when we jump back over here to look, the link will be here on this page. This is just
Yes, there it is. Great.
a
Yeah.
picture of it. So yes.
Yeah, someone had asked, and that's a great idea, just to be able to have that really easy and clickable. So I have a question, Matt. Given that epics are done at that high portfolio level, with the portfolio management, and as you say, then things get decided on, and then you want to get a release train working on it, and then they turn into features and stories. Do you have any examples of where that works well, or areas, and conversely, areas where maybe there have been some challenges in getting your visions from the epic down to, something actionable for the teams, and that kind of like two different groups working on that?
Yeah. So what works the best is when you have product management here and you've got these business owners, which business owners technically sit up here at the LPM level as well. But when you bring product management and business owners together with other product managers and business owners across the portfolio, and they all know and understand each other's epics, that's when it's the best, because we can align it and go, oh, Helene, I see what you're talking about, and that thing that you want, it probably is better than the thing that I want. We should focus time there. So when you have that collaboration and that agreement, and people don't get their pet projects, that's a really big problem within organizations, right? This is my pet project. My bonus is tied to whether or not that thing happens. Who cares how valuable it is? Yeah. So somebody's agreeing with that. I don't know who it was, but yeah. My bonus is tied to delivering this new widget. Whether or not it's important for the customer, valuable for the business, or whatever, doesn't matter. It's my bonus that matters. That's when things break down, because then people are trying to get their pet project pushed through. Whenever we have a group like the LPM that gets together and says, look, here's all the big things we could work on. How do we do it? That's when the magic happens. Now, there's another thing I want to show with this, and Arson, I know that you have a question. I promise I won't forget. The way that we define epic is pretty interesting. So we use this epic hypothesis statement. This is kind of the beginning of an epic. It's not intended to be a definition of every piece of work that has to happen to get this epic done. In fact, it's more of a hypothesis statement saying, we think that if we build something like this, we're going to get some value. And this little formula here, this formula is not the right word. This layout is a good way. This template. There we go. English escapes me sometimes. I wish it were my second language so that I had a really good reason for English to escape me, but it's not. So this template works really well to get the conversation going for, hey, we got this big piece of work, and we think if we do this big piece of work, we're going to get some value. Now, SAFE says that we should take this and we should present it in the form of an MVP, and we should work on some small thing that gives us the idea that, yes, this really will work, right? You're going to build some little bit of it. You're going to get a little bit of feedback from some customers. Maybe it's, only released to 100 people. Maybe you've put it together with baling wire and duct tape just to see if the idea can function. But that's what we want to do with the Epic. And this is important because one of the biggest pieces of overhead that a lot of companies just can't seem to let go of, and SAFE tells them to, as we look at our portfolio Kanban, this column over here of done, too many companies don't really pay attention to what done means here according to SAFE. They go, done means when it's done being implemented, meaning I had this big epic and I worked on it for the last year and a half and now it's all done. No, 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 no. Done is when LPM governance is no longer required, meaning we've proven this is a good thing to do. Therefore, product management, y'all go run with it down at the Agile release train level. We're not going to track it at the portfolio level. So a lot of feedback that I get about SAFE is that it's very complex and very heavy. And sometimes it's complex and heavy because of the way people are trying to implement it, in that the portfolio is trying to watch things all the way through development and all the way out to production. And it does. It gets heavy to do that, but that's not what's intended with these epics. It's intended to be, let's test this out and make sure it's a good idea. After we're sure it's a good idea and then it's going to provide good value, we decentralize the decisions, and product management and the Agile release trains run forward with it. All right, Jim, you came second. I got to go to Arson first.
First of all, thank you, Matt, for this presentation. It was amazing.
Absolutely.
And so I would like to ask about SAFE and the other scaled framework, agile framework, such as LESS, Nexus, and others. And if you can have a chance to compare with, what would the biggest outstanding feature in SAFE which differentiate SAFE from the other scale frameworks?
Yeah. So I am not as intimately familiar with LESS or Scaled Scrum or any of the others. I understand them at a cursory level, but not deep. If I read, like when I go and I read the articles on it and stuff, it's two different approaches intended for the same thing but described differently. SAFE is intended as an enterprise framework to achieve business agility. Scaled Scrum is intended as a way to get multiple Scrum teams that need to interact together. SAFE has that same portion. We put them on an Agile release train. We do things like PI planning, which PI planning is very specific to SAFE. I don't think Scaled Scrum has anything that looks like that. But SAFE looks at it as an enterprise framework, where Scaled Scrum looks at it as a framework to help Scrum teams work together. And while those when I say it like that, they're very different. But when you look at it from, well, but SAFE has an Agile release train, it's like Scaled Scrum focuses on a circle this big. SAFE has that same thing, but SAFE wants the outer edge too, that says we're going to bring in HR, we're going to talk about finance, we're going to talk about the way that we fund all of this work, we're going to talk about the way that that we do participatory budgeting so that we know how much money to spend on various different things. And I don't think Scaled Scrum gets down into those weeds, those enterprise level weeds for how all the different parts of the organization would interact.
Thank you.
Absolutely. All right, Jim, give me the hard question.
Oh, that was pretty good. No, I just want to go back. You had just shown when governance is no longer required. In other words, when the concept has been validated, but doesn't that also apply when we've realized, you know what, it's not worth it. They don't really want it. They're not willing to pay for it, etc.
Absolutely.
You retire it at that point, right? So
yeah, let me
either way, it gets it off the map.
Oh, they moved the picture.
Governance.
Yeah, absolutely. When we discover that, I was actually reading an article just the other day about Jeff Bezos and the Fire phone. Everybody remember the Fire phone from the 2010-ish time frame? It was only around for a couple of years. Whenever that happens, whenever it's like, yeah, that's not going to meet the needs of whatever it was we thought it was. Whenever we prove that that business hypothesis statement that we put out is false, yeah, we shut it down, move it to done. We don't have to worry about that anymore.
Yeah, they don't show that. That's interesting. They don't show it in the diagram.
Actually, they do. This is me. I'm old, Jim, and they changed the picture on me. Used to, I could click on portfolio backlog and it would show me the the picture of the MVP cycle. I'll find it in a second. That's a long one, and I still didn't get me what I wanted.
Wow.
I will
One
find.
thing about
I will
SAFE is
find
it
it.
has plenty of documentation.
It has plenty of documentation, yeah. But there's a picture where they talk about, hey, as I'm going through, does this MVP meet the needs of the customer? Does it meet our business hypothesis that we put together? If yes, then we decide, do we continue building on it, or does it meet the need, but it's not the most important thing anymore? If it's not the most important thing, we stop development on it. If it didn't meet the business hypothesis statement, then we stop it. And so it kind of shows, it's a little flow chart that shows
Trying to
how all of
master
that
the
works.
art of work not done.
Absolutely, absolutely. And again, the intent of SAFE is to shut that down and say we don't want to work on it. The culture of organizations is, well, what if we spend an extra $1 million on it? Do you think we could get it done then? And it's no. We proved that this isn't a good idea. So sometimes the ways that the organizations are wired works against them, as we all know.
Like the bonus wiring you were talking earlier,
Like what?
like the bonus wiring.
Yep.
Yeah. That
Pay attention
that
to the
whole
incentives.
how am I incentivized is huge. It's huge. All right. So that's the SAFE overview, and I'm happy to stick here and talk more about it. But we can also come in, because I know you guys have heard stuff. We've all heard a lot of things. So if y'all follow that link that I put in the chat, and I can put it in there again if we've had any people join a little bit late, that'll get you to the concept board. Feel free to come in here and put a sticky note on what you've heard. Let's see, we've been at this for 57 minutes so far. Let's take maybe 5 minutes and see how we're doing. And if I don't see anybody putting stuff on for 5 minutes, then we'll stop and carry on. But what have you heard about SAFE? It's really good at this thing. It really sucks at that thing. My goodness, it's not Agile.
Hey Matt, I did put a question in the chat, just really quick about could epics be considered business requirements level?
If I were going, if I'm trying to map something to business requirements, that's closer to the story level.
Okay, got
The
you.
epics are the really big ideas. It's
Got you.
it's stuff that we're typically going to work on for multiple months.
Okay.
And then we try to break those big things down into smaller rocks. So take the big rocks, break them into smaller rocks, because small things flow through the system faster. It's kind of using some lean thinking ideas there.
Mm-hmm.
But
so it's like, for instance, if you like integrate AWS into EIT or something in our IT department.
Yeah,
that could be an epic, or
I would even go maybe even bigger than that. Like just going back to the example that I used with USAA, wanting to start a new credit card. We want to do a rewards credit card so that people can earn travel rewards points.
Got you. Okay.
That might be an epic level thing. And then the features become the different features of the card. Well, they're going to be able to earn points, and we're going to have a floating interest rate, and we're going to do this. And then the stories become, when we do our floating interest rate, here's the rules around that and why we have it the way it is.
Got you. Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. See a couple of people still writing.
I have a confession.
Okay.
I'm embarrassed.
Why?
I did finally figure out how to move a Post-it note, even resize it. But I click on it and I start typing on my keyboard and nothing happens. And I see little links on there and I'm see text style, but I don't.
Double click
Do
on
I
it.
double click on it?
Double click on the sticky note, and it should
Ah, a little cursor
give you a
pops
little
up there. Okay. All right. And then it's like you gotta find a font big enough to read it, but not. Okay. Thank you, Matt.
Absolutely. All right. I see two more sticky notes being written.
Let's see if I can. Oh.
All right. I'm going to click back over to the presentation now. And get this out of our way. Here we go. I'm going to tell y'all what I've heard. What I've heard, safe isn't agile. Very common. Why would you want to plan a full quarter's worth of stuff in PI planning? Isn't that too far out? Why are we doing all this big upfront planning? I hear that a lot. The other thing I hear is safe is too complex. Not gonna lie, that picture that we just went through, there's a lot of stuff there.
Hmm.
We're also working with very large and very complex organizations. We have to have something that fits the scale of the organization. And I've also heard, hey, none of the top companies, Apple doesn't use safe. Surely if Apple doesn't use it, nobody needs it, right? All right, okay, fine. What does safe say to these things? Safe has kind of some things, and this is a little bit of what safe says, and this is a little bit of what Matt says, but safe isn't agile. Well, it's designed for creating business agility for large and complex systems. The level of agility we have to be able to talk. We talk about team level agility, and we want our teams to be as agile as they can within that team context, but they have to be able to interact with this larger system. Safe is not solely based on agile. Safe uses lean, it uses theory of constraints. Safe has even come up with some of their own values and principles that more clearly articulate what it is. I look at it, I'm like, oh, I see the echoes of the Agile Manifesto. I see the echoes of lean right there. Let me show y'all where y'all can see this because I think it's important. I'm gonna go back here to the safe big picture. Down here at the bottom, this is intended to be the foundation of the framework, if you will. And they say, hey, you have to have a lean agile mindset. When you click on the lean agile mindset, you get in here and you get to talk about things like lean and the agile values. So you see the Agile Manifesto. You scroll down a little bit more and you get to see the 12 principles. Next one now. The 12 principles of the Agile Manifesto. So they're saying, hey, we understand these things and we use them. And then SAFE says, hey, we also have some core values of SAFE. And they describe them like this. They say, hey, we have alignment, we have relentless improvement, we have respect for people, and we have transparency. Oddly enough, the core values in SAFE 6 changed. They had been the same from, as far as I know, the first version of SAFE until SAFE 5.1. And then when they came to 6, they changed it. It used to be alignment, transparency, program execution, and built-in quality. And they changed it in 6.0. On the fence as to whether or not I like the change. There's times I'm like, yeah, this is good. And there's times like, oh, gosh, I miss the old days. But anyway, they have 4 core values that they talk about. And then they have 10 safe principles that they use. They call them the safe lean agile principles. There's 10 principles here that they use. And things like, I like it because this number 8 in the background here, it's like, go read Dan Pink's book called Drive. And now you understand motivation. And it talks about how autonomy, mastery, and purpose are what motivates knowledge workers.
But,
If you,
how does that actually happen once you put this heavy process and framework in place? And then you have a whole lot of directives coming from top level portfolio management, et cetera. That's where I'm having trouble seeing it.
Because it's not intended to be top level directives. It's intended to be, this is the vision of where we want to go. Product management and teams, you guys work to build this in the best way to help our customer that you know how, because they're closer to the customer. And they even show that in relativeness on the big picture. Look, the portfolio up here, the customer actually exists down here where we're executing. So it's not intended to be, this is the way you're going to build it. It's intended to be, this is our goal and this is the problem we want to solve. You guys help us figure out the best way to solve it. Intention.
That's probably where a lot
and
of
the
it is
way-
getting lost.
Oh, yeah. So much of this is the culture of a corporation, the culture of any big organization, be it a company or a government or whatever. Shifting is very, very tough. And so they take the implements that SAFe gives us and turn them into the hammer that they normally use. And that's not at all the intent, but I will agree that it is the way that it's implemented sometimes. All right, go back over here. So it's not based on Agile. In fact, Dean Leffingwell, who is the creator of SAFe, he put his own principles in there, but they do align to Agile thinking, things like decentralized decisions, things like focusing on the customer. It's all there. And then the problems solved by the manifesto are good for the problems that it can solve. It was great in 2001. It's great for an individual team doing stuff. But large organizations have additional problems where it's not that they solved those problems and, oh, great, we can move on to bigger ones. It's they have additional problems. And it's additional problems of how do we make that tie from the goals of the organization down to the possibly hundreds or thousands of teams that we have executing in the organization. That's a really, really hard problem to solve. SAFe gives us an answer. I wrote this. I know some of you know Mike Russell. He gives a lot of analogies about boats and missiles and all kinds of cool stuff like that. We need speedboats and we need aircraft carriers. Both of them have advantages in the world, and some of these really, really large organizations are the aircraft carriers, and we still need to figure out how to make an aircraft carrier as agile as we possibly can. All right, the next one that I hear a lot, SAFe is too complex. Well, SAFe is a framework, and it's a framework that's designed for very large and complex enterprises. There's lots of moving parts and lots of interested stakeholders in those large organizations, and SAFe helps us to address each of them and make sure that all of them are taken care of appropriately. Right now I'm working with 2 different organizations that are having the same problem. There's like this little identity crisis that goes on because usually it's middle management and sometimes executive management that's like, wait a second. What you just said is I don't get to tell people what to do anymore. What am I going to do now? Like, what's my job tomorrow if I don't tell people what to do? And it's a very hard concept. But if we really kind of step back and we look at it and we start talking to them about it, what they realize is that the thing they haven't been doing for the last who knows how long is having some of these strategic discussions that happen up here between the enterprise and the portfolio. They haven't been thinking about what are the things that we need tomorrow. They've just been thinking about how are we executing on the things today. And when we talk about that and we look at it from a product strategy and an organizational strategy perspective, they start to think about their life differently. Sometimes that's a big leap, but it's a good leap to take. Like any transformation, SAFe meets the customer where they are, and then it builds from there. SAFe is complex when you look at the whole picture. One of the things that I didn't show fully here, but I'll go back and show it. At its core, this is essential SAFe. There's no portfolio on top. This is how we execute. Do we have somebody that can supply work to the art backlog, and then we break those features down into stories and the team works on the stories? That's kind of at the core of SAFe. I've got multiple teams that have to get put together. Back to, I think it was Arson's question about, hey, how does this work? How does this compare to scaled Scrum? This is SAFe's answer to that. It's like, look, if all you need to do is get teams to coordinate, there you go. This is how we would do it. And then SAFe says, we know there's more out there. We know that there's more questions that happen. Let us give you the portfolio level, because we know that you have to tie strategy to execution. If you're not doing good strategic stuff, we'll help you. We can set up this LPM that is a group that's intended to focus on tying strategy to execution. And these are the roles, artifacts, and events that happen at the portfolio level that can make those things happen. But some organizations, they just don't have that practice today. They've got the one CEO at the top that makes all the decisions and says, I think this is the most important thing, go, but has nothing more than their gut feel on on whether or not that's true or not. For not all parts of the framework are always needed. Helene, don't let me go too long. When do I need to stop talking?
8:30 is our end time, so that's another 20 minutes. But
I won't go the whole time. I promise.
Okay, that sounds great.
The last one that I hear a lot is top companies don't use it. I'll say this: it's not for all companies. I mentioned Apple earlier. I think Apple has some pretty good processes in place. They have grown their processes internally. I have no idea what they really use, but they don't use SAFe, and that's okay. They have other things that work. They also have different approaches than almost the rest of the world. SAFe is the most widely used scaling framework, and because it's widely used, it's had a lot of learning cycle. If I get 100 or 500 or 1,000 or however many companies use SAFe today, and they all go through some PIs, they go, this works or this doesn't. And a lot of that feedback comes back to Scaled Agile, and they adjust the framework based on it. In fact, that's why we're on version 6 now, is because they kind of continually curate it. They're always making small adjustments. It always makes me laugh a little bit because people will call me and they'll be like, hey, I heard SAFe came out with version 6. Do I need to recertify? And I'm like, at the core, it's all the same. We still have Agile release trains. We have teams that do this stuff. We have the same roles, the same artifacts, the same events, but what we're adding is just a little extra layer of thought. And in fact, in SAFe 6, they added a lot around flow. It's always been there. They've always talked about how we need to focus on flow and ensure that we enable flow, and we need to remove bottlenecks and stuff. But they really came in and they articulated, what do they mean when they say we need to focus on flow? And so like you could click here and you could be like, well, what does it look like at team flow? And they added this part that they call it the flow accelerators. And the first of the flow accelerators is to visualize and limit WIP. We've all heard those words before. SAFe has used those words before, but now they're saying, hey, at a team level, how do we focus on visualizing and limiting WIP? How do we address bottlenecks? How do we minimize handoffs and dependencies? And then I can click up here on art flow. And it's the same flow accelerators. How do I visualize and limit WIP, but I'm doing it at the art level? And then I can do it at the portfolio level the same. So this was one of the big changes that they made in 6.0. They just articulated, when we say focus on flow, what do we mean? Here's some great ways for us to do it. So that's what they do in between the things. But they took this from feedback from some of the many, many companies that are using SAFe and put it into action. So who do we know that uses it? Lockheed Martin does, Porsche does, Siemens. I actually happen to work with Siemens right now. CVS does. They actually just put out a big new, I don't know if it's a white paper or I don't know how they classified it, but it's how CVS used design thinking for one of their projects and stuff. And then Deutsche Telekom, they use it. USAA uses it. A lot of the governments are starting to, like local government type stuff is starting to, I say local, state government is starting to use it. So there's a lot of big names out there that do use it. All right. I promised there wasn't many slides. Here's the last one that we're going to have open forum, but I want to switch back over here and click here because I want to see what you guys put on here. We can talk about, did I answer it on those slides or not? All right, it's not agile. Do we want to talk more about that? This is again, to me, this is it's a fly swatter. It'll kill a fly, but you don't want to use it to kill all flies. There's times that you actually do need that fly swatter or that sledgehammer. So go get it. Safe is not safe. Yeah. This one to me, it's the framework. If somebody came to me and said, "Hey Matt, I need to lose some weight." Now, I'm not like a master fitness guy or anything, but I'm pretty sure that the answer is you need to eat less, you need to work out more, and you need to get 8 hours of sleep. If you can do those three things, I'm pretty sure we can start to see some results. And then if you come back to me in 2 months or 6 months and you go, Matt, your plans suck. I'm like, well, gosh, tell me about this. Did you eat less? And you go, you know what? I started eating less, but what I noticed that I was hungry. So now I eat the same amount. Well, all right. Well, are you working out more? Well, I tried. The only time I could work out was early in the morning. And, I started off really, really good. And then like I kind of missed my bed. I wanted to sleep in a little bit. So I don't work out that much more. Like I'm doing more than I used to, but I certainly don't do it enough. Okay, great. But Matt, I get 8 hours of sleep a night. I go to bed at 11 o'clock. I wake up at 7. What do you think my response is going to be? You did some of the stuff that I said, but you didn't do it all. And I think that when safe is not safe, we're seeing organizations that aren't fully embodying a lot of the principles that we take. They aren't decentralizing decisions. They aren't focusing on the customer. They aren't fill in the blank with whatever it is. And that makes it not safe. Now, the other thing that I've learned through the years, I've been playing in the Agile world since about 2007. And the other thing that I've noticed is that halfway is a lot more painful than going all the way or not doing anything at all. So if you're going to do Agile, don't try to mix it and say, well, yeah, we're going to do safe, but we still have project budget. That's really, really hard. Safe has ways that you do funding and it's not through project. So don't do that. Don't go halfway. You've either got to go all the way and try to do everything or just stay where you are, because on either end is where the least amount of pain happens. There's a whole lot of pain when you're stuck in the middle. Anybody have something else about safe not being safe? I mean, I totally am. I don't want you to think I'm making this up, but like that's not a prepared answer. That's just Matt's opinions on the world.
Well, and Matt, you could
No,
say,
thanks.
oh, I'm sorry, Greg. You could say the same thing about Scrum. Scrum isn't
Absolutely.
Scrum. Scrum isn't, it doesn't work. And but the same story, well, I tried doing that, but well, we don't really have teams, or, oh, well, we don't let we let our sprints kind of slop over.
But Helene, we have daily stand-ups. We meet every day for a daily stand-up. Isn't that
Right.
enough, right?
And they're really great. They're half an hour long and we talk about everything. Yeah.
It doesn't solve your problems. It exposes your problems.
Thank you,
Oh,
Jim.
man.
Yes.
I have that conversation so many times. Yeah, I tell people any agile methodology is nothing more than a microscope. And the things you do really, really good are going to look really, really good under that microscope. And the things that you do bad, man, they're going to hurt.
Yeah.
All right. Big consultants use safe to avoid delivering. Yeah, big consultants and these big consulting firms, they drive me as crazy as they do anybody else. Um, uh, it you can absolutely get into, let me help you through this transformation for a year and deliver no result. I can do that with anything, right? But safe gives you some convenient places to hide your lack of delivering if you so desire. I will not deny it. I will say I really hate going into, I don't know, maybe I like going into clients that have been through that experience, because then when I come in, they're like, you talk about this different than our last people did. They wanted to bring in 30 coaches and you brought in who? How are we going to do that? And I'm like, because I'm going to have you guys working. We're going to get results. So I'm not going to hide people away in a conference room. And anyway, it's kind of fun. It is big and it is unwieldy at times. Yes, we looked at the big picture. There's a lot to it. We don't need it all. And like anything that you go in, you have to go in and you have to talk to the client and meet them where they are. I'm working with a client right now that hired me to come do safe, and then we talked them out of it. We said, man, we don't think you need that. Why don't we just focus on getting your scrum teams actually scrumming? And then if we decide we need safe, we'll put that in later. And I'm like, oh, really? Yeah, really. Trust us here. More like waterfall than agile. I hear this a lot because PI planning is a big upfront type planning. The intent is not for it to be a completely big upfront planning. We're not going to plan out step by step for the entire quarter. It does get into that. The teams do kind of crave that. Like when you have a planning event, they want to map it all out. But keeping it at the right level, there is a balance. It's very there's no quick and easy answer to get the balance right. But I don't want to plan it down to the nth level of detail, but I also don't want to leave it so ambiguous that we don't know what we're going to do for the next quarter. So finding that balance, but I will agree there is more big upfront planning in a PI planning event than what Scrum would do in scaled Scrum because they don't look at it from a quarter view. They just look at it sprint by sprint. Large organizations get nervous with that sometimes. Would I say that it's closer to hybrid? B is putting that in the chat. I'm hesitant to say that it's hybrid because there really is the struggle with waterfall is that the feedback loop is way too long. So you do a big upfront plan and you don't get the feedback till the end. And in safe, we do a big upfront plan, but we're getting feedback multiple times throughout until the end of that time box. So it's not intended that what I plan in PI planning doesn't get realized until the end of the PI. It's just directionally over the next quarter, where are we going? And I continually get that feedback every iteration through iteration demos and through system demos and things like that. So calling it a hybrid, mostly because I'm a super duper agile geek, it kind of hits a nerve with me, but I understand where you're going with it. All right. Marketed heavily, designed to make top management feel agile without changing much about the way they work. I will agree with the everything up to here. We want them to feel agile. We want them to be agile, but we do tell them that we want them to change a whole lot about the way they work. Sometimes that happens and sometimes it doesn't. I will tell you that the magical clients that I've had is when management is like, wow, I have to change some stuff. And they get busy changing stuff. And it's not change stuff within the organization only, it's change stuff with the way that I communicate with the organization. That's where it's the biggest. And I will also say that's not just safe, right? If you can have a leader that really embodies the transformation and the place that we want to go in the future, I don't care what that thing is, be it safe or to the moon, that leadership is what's key. And safe actually has a lot of content around how important leadership is to make all that stuff happen. Let's see, we have people sync into Scrum teams. We sync the Scrum teams with the trains and we can sync the train too. Yes. Somebody want to elaborate on that? Like all of that makes sense. This is the whole point of scaling. We're syncing these groups into larger groups to meet the size and complexity of the thing that we're building. The absolutely true agilist in me would say, do we need the big thing that we're building? But once you decide we do need that big thing, then you want to break it down into the smallest things, and then you have to sync all the way up. I don't know another way to solve it. Recruiters requiring safe Scrum Masters. Yeah, if you come take my my safe Scrum Master class, what you'll learn is that we give maybe 20% of of a head nod to this is how you be a Scrum Master. There's a lot of assumptions that you kind of already know what that means. And then the other 80% of the class is how do you be a Scrum Master in a safe environment? And I will say, well, I don't think it's a stretch for an experienced Scrum Master to walk into a safe environment and learn what's going on. That's not a stretch. I understand them saying that they want Scrum Masters to be familiar with SAFe to come get the certification. I sell certifications for a living. Like that is where that's how I feed my family. And I will tell you that certifications don't always mean a lot. It's the education that you get when you go to class that does. When you come out, it tells people that there is a vocabulary and a conversation that you should be able to hold. And if you come to me with a SAFe Scrum Master certification, do I think you're going to be an amazing Scrum Master in my organization? No. What I think is when I ask you, tell me about the best PI planning you've ever been to, you better be able to tell me what the heck PI planning is and why that was the best one. It tells me that there's a vocabulary we should have. Recruiters and their dependencies on certifications kind of irk me from time to time. And the SPC treadmill. Yeah, I sell that certification too. I love it when I get the people that come in and say, I want to learn this stuff so that I can apply it and I can help organizations get better. And when I hear people come in and they're like, can I have the certification? I had a guy reach out to me the other day and he said, I heard that if I get a Scrum Master certification, I could make $100,000 a year. And I said, what do you do now? And he said, I drive taxis. And I said, I'm not going to tell you you can't make $100,000 a year by becoming a Scrum Master. But I will tell you that just by getting the certification, you're not going to get, nobody's going to say, oh, you've got the certification here, have $100,000 a year. I said, that's not the way it works. So we'll see. He claims that he was going to call me back. And Jim, just so you know, I sent him to Job Hacker. I said, go look at Job Hacker. Because
Sorry, it's a little hard to hear you right now, Matt.
Oh, no, I don't want it to be hard to hear me. What I said is the guy
Okay.
that wanted to make $100,000 being a Scrum Master, who's a current taxi driver.
Oh, yeah.
I told him, I said, I totally think you should be a Scrum Master. Like, if that's what you want to do, go learn about it and figure it out. And then I told him to come see you at Job Hackers because I said, you've got to go get some foundational stuff and you can go do it for free. So we'll see if he shows up. I don't know.
Well, let's see if he shows up in January, or next class will start in February.
There we go.
Anyway, a few questions for you or comments if you.
Yeah,
Matt?
go ahead.
Yeah, my ears burned a couple of times because I heard you say phrases like, we're going to assign these people to teams and those teams, we'll tell these teams to go execute these directives, et cetera. And that flew in the face of a lot of self-organization principles of Scrum that we like to talk about. And so I just there was that, and there was also the concept of demo, whereas in Scrum, a sprint review is really about inspecting the product, not to see, does it do what we said we were going to make it do, but what is the current state of the product and where do we go from here? More of a forward-looking event. So those two just kind of rubbed me a little bit. Somebody was asking what's the difference between Scrum and Scrum as applied and SAFe, and I was just wondering what your thoughts on that was.
Yeah, no, some of that is more likely my language. I never want to imply that we take away the self-organization of the teams. It's not the intent. The team should self-organize. In fact, the Agile release train is nothing more than a collection of Agile teams that should self-organize around solving a problem. We do run into a little bit of friction with organizations because, but the database team isn't going to be on the train, so you always have to request stuff from the database team. That's not the intent of how they want the Agile release train or a Scrum team to be set up, because they should be self-contained and be able to do anything that they need to. Yeah. They should be able to work in the way that they need to get the thing done. Organizations sometimes push against that. Now the demo is a lot of my words because that's how people think about it. But you're absolutely correct. It should be a much more forward-thinking activity. It should be, where are we now? And in fact, the system demo, when we're putting your puzzle piece and my puzzle piece together to make sure that the bigger thing of where is the system now is shown, that is much more the intent. But it is also feedback. Yes, that's what I expected. Yes, I think it will solve the problems, or that's not what I expected and I really like it. or that's not what I expected, or that's what I said, but that's not what I meant. We get a lot of those kinds of things as well, because we want to make sure we're getting feedback from all the people who hear from and talk to the customer more than the team does. I don't want to imply the team shouldn't talk to the customer. It's just that product owners and product management should talk to them quite a bit more than the team does.
Thanks. Those are appropriate comments to that. There was just one more thing, and that is, where's the opportunity for serendipitous discovery? I see in the Agile train diagram, they talk about continuous exploration, but are the teams really given the liberty to do that? Or is the enterprise and portfolio level, are the people there thinking we're going to just get the max out of these folks, make sure we load up the backlogs as much as we can, keep them busy?
Yeah. So let me continuous exploration is something a little bit different. We're kind of out of time, but I'm going to click on something here to show y'all. The IP iteration is called the innovation and planning iteration. You're supposed to have an IP iteration. It's the last iteration of any PI. So if you've got 5 iterations, this one we're taking 20% of our time dedicated to innovation and planning. And I love it because there's a picture down here. Remember the circle of life was my favorite picture. This is my second favorite picture. This is the intent of the innovation and planning iteration. If there's overflow work, it's supposed to be buffer. We don't want there to be overflow work, but if so, let's get it done. Can we do skills development and learning? Yeah. And I always teach people, I'm like, come and take a SAFE class from Matt, right? Prepare for PI planning. Yeah, we might need to socialize some of those features that we were looking at and make sure we understand them, but then innovations and hackathons. This is where that serendipitous learning happens. It's the team getting that freedom to go, what if we did this? Oh, that sounds really good. And mixing the two chemicals to see if it's a happy result or an end result. So yeah, this innovation and planning iteration, that's kind of your free time. Now they say that innovation should happen throughout the sprint or throughout the PI. And yes, that's true. You should be innovating as you go, but this is dedicated time. And
well, it's good to see it reserved.
I will say it is almost 50-50 down the middle. Some of my clients are like, we don't have time to let people be innovative. We're just going to tell them what to do and off we go. You can imagine how those transformations go. The ones that let this happen, they're like, oh, my teams are becoming more cross-functional. They're becoming more productive because they're building things. Like I had a guy that built a script. He said, I come into work every day, I sit down and I push some buttons on my computer and then I go get coffee. And then I come back and I push buttons and then I go get coffee. And he said, there is a lot of weight in that because I'm waiting on my computer to do stuff. He said, I built a script so that every time I boot up my computer, it brings up my IDE and it connects me to all the different systems that I need it to. And he said, it just happens when I turn on my computer. Yes, it takes 10 minutes, but it doesn't require the intervention from me. And he said, I'm estimating that it saves me 5 to 10 minutes of productivity a day. Mm-hmm. And everybody else on the team said, I'd like that. So now we have 5 to 10 minutes of productivity on every person from the team. And then all of a sudden it was the entire Agile release train. And now we've got 100 people who are saving 5 to 10 minutes a day. And everybody's just happier about it. And they get 5 to 10 minutes of their day back. So yeah, it's all right there. Good question. All right. With that though, I am 3 minutes over and I would go over. So I apologize. Helene, back to you.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Matt. This was a great talk. So can everyone give Matt some applause? Thank you for giving us your insights. Much appreciated. Great. I wanted to take just a moment to share my screen to let people know what's coming up in our Agile Groupies group. So we've just had our Safe, the Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. We have a December Agile group discussion. We do these monthly, where these are a lean coffee format and meant to be free format discussions. So we have our December group discussion set, and we have a January one set already, and that's going to be focused on Agile coaching. We're going to try to keep that focus because many folks here might recollect that we tend to have an Agile coach retreat every January, and we've been doing it remotely. We've been getting questions and requests to do it in person. So we have scheduled our annual Agile Coach Retreat for warmer weather. It's scheduled for Saturday, June 8th, 2024. So I've already got that posted up on our calendar. We're building up the agenda. We've got some core sessions set, 4 sessions set. It'll be a whole day event, just like we used to run, held in Ann Arbor, Michigan. So I know for those who are remote, that's where we've got the Agile coaching discussion in January set to help our remote customers or remote clients who can't and don't want to come to Ann Arbor, Michigan in any time of the year. I totally understand. But we've had a lot of requests for getting back to in-person. So we're going to give it a try in our experimental approach. So I wanted to let people know of what's coming up at Agile Groupies as we round out the year and already thinking of 2024. So check us out on Meetup for Agile Groupies, and I will get this posted on both the Mid-Michigan Agile Group is working with us on this, the Ann Arbor Tech Group and Daytona Devs, at least for the remote sessions. I'll get those on there, but just letting everyone know what's coming. So thanks everyone again for attending. I will be turning the recording off. Oh, and I see a few more things in chat. Is there anything we need to? You can see my bookmarks. That's okay. No worries. Thanks everyone again for attending. I'll turn off the recording and I will send out links to that as it gets completed.